Former president and current 2024 Republican candidate Donald Trump will be arraigned in a Florida court on Tuesday, facing 37 charges that include alleged national security violations, conspiracy, and obstructing a federal investigation after leaving office. Trump is also accused of sharing sensitive U.S. secrets with individuals who had no security clearances. There's no reference in the indictments to any business attempts to profit using the classified data. Now, Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer at The Hill, joins us now to expand further. Welcome to Rising.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
So what should we expect to see at this arraignment?
Well, the question is whether he's going to be fingerprinted, whether he's going to be handcuffed, whether he's going to get his mugshot taken. And right now, we don't really know that. And we don't know, the hearing is going to be at 3 p.m., but we don't know who the presiding judge will be. We don't know whether it'll be Judge Eileen Cannon, who, of course, Trump appointed to the bench after he lost the 2020 election, or whether it's going to be a magistrate judge, someone else. We don't know if it's going to be the judge that signed the search warrant for the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago. So there's a lot of up in the air right now, but we do know that it's going to be a media circus. I think we're pretty assured of that.
Can you speak to the particular charges against Donald Trump and what legal experts are pointing to as the most damning among them?
Well, there are a lot of them, and I think take your pick. He's accused of showing to a writer who didn't have a security clearance a military plan to attack Iran. He showed a classified military map to someone without a security clearance. He showed information to a staffer on his political action committee who didn't have a security clearance. He had discussions with his lawyers as to how to oppose or how to thwart authorities trying to take the documents back. And so the New York Times had an interesting piece up last night and this morning about how the special counsel, Jack Smith, was able to get Trump's notes of Trump's discussions with his own lawyer. And Jack Smith made a motion arguing that this was criminal activity, these discussions, therefore it was pertinent and relevant and could be used as evidence. And so I think that's going to be one of the big questions at the trial going forward as to whether that is allowed in court. But there is essentially Trump was in negotiations or was in a strategizing session with his lawyer as to how to prevent the FBI from obtaining the classified documents and whether he would even admit to having them. So that goes directly to the obstruction of justice charge.
Yeah, notably, Alan Dershowitz has pushed back against that decision to allow the conversations with attorneys that ordinarily would be barred by attorney-client privilege to be used here, saying that it would really undermine the whole point of attorney-client privilege is to allow for a certain fluency in conversation between attorneys and their clients, which, in his experience, he said, include many discussions in which the defendants reveal particularly potentially criminal behavior or decisions that they've made in the past to him, and that it would have a real freezing effect if this were a rule that stood. Have you heard much commentary about the likelihood of that decision being reversed in any way?
Well, I mean, Jack Smith has the information, so you can't reverse it. The question is whether
the
it's
admissibility of it
admissible at trial, and that's going to be up to the judge, whoever presides, and it's going to be subject to appeal as well. So this decision may ultimately be decided by the Supreme Court. Yes, there is attorney-client privilege unless those discussions are in furtherance of a crime, which is what Jack Smith argued, that this was in furtherance of a crime. It was to deny the existence of these classified documents that the government had a right to possess. And there was even a suggestion in the attorney's notes that Trump suggested that the attorney destroy some of the documents. So that's another issue that's going to certainly poses a criminal liability for the former president. So if this is in fact, and I think there's a pretty strong case to be made that that these discussions with the attorney was in furtherance of a crime, that it would very much be admissible. Now, you want to know what experts are saying. Bill Barr, President Trump's former Attorney General has called the indictment very damning. So he is not criticizing it. And of course, Alan Dershowitz represented Trump at his impeachment trial in the Senate. So he is very much a partisan in this issue, and he has represented Trump in the past and may again in the future. So he's I would not look at him as a neutral expert in any way.
Rachel Maddow on MSNBC raised a possibility that probably many people are wondering about. Could there be some kind of deal to prevent criminal penalties for Trump if he agrees to drop out of running for president in 2024? Obviously, that speaks to a concern that many conservatives have, that this is really an effort to intervene or interfere in the political process for Donald Trump. What do you think of the likelihood of some kind of deal like that being reached? Because of that perception being so bad for law enforcement, would it have to come from Trump's side of the negotiating table?
I think that's far-fetched, honestly, because Trump is there really is no rationale for him to drop out, and that if he did drop out as part of a criminal settlement with the Department of Justice, he'd be admitting guilt, and he's far from doing that. If he were to, it's hard to imagine that Trump would, promise to drop out of the race, and the Department of Justice, after going this far, would then just drop the charges. I mean, the charges are out there; they're moving ahead with the prosecution. I mean, Jack Smith was very clear that this is a violation of the law. So those charges can't be dropped. Now, could there be some sort of settlement where Trump would, of course, have to admit guilt, and then as part of that settlement that he agrees not to run for president? I think that's completely far-fetched, because Trump's not admitting any guilt here. He's not anywhere close to admitting guilt. He's saying that this is a political hit job, and it's orchestrated. It's a con. It's a hoax. So to think that he might cut some sort of deal, and I think is fantasy.
What do you make of folks who say that the very choice to charge Trump with the higher standard of willful mismanagement of these documents, willful failure to return the documents, as opposed to the lower charge that doesn't have the mens rea of willfulness, that would implicate Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Mike Pence, is an admission on some level that this is a specifically political prosecution, that making the charge more difficult in order to exclude actors from falling under those charges, from being implicated by those charges, is a tacit admission that there's an effort to go after Trump individually as opposed to go after the crime itself. And does that invalidate the prosecution, or at least undermine it politically in a way that might cost Democrats down the line?
I don't think there's any tacit admission of anything, and I'll just point out that the special counsel, Jack Smith, who's prosecuting Trump, I mean, he's not handling the Biden investigation. That is a different special counsel. So the other special counsel investigating Biden, he'll make his own decisions as to what he's going to do. I think Jack Smith is pursuing the strongest charges for which he has compelling evidence that he can prove a crime beyond reasonable doubt. And the lawyer's notes that show that, and also the recording where Trump knew that he had classified information. He admits that he didn't declassify it. He is in negotiations with his lawyers as to how to prevent the Justice Department from learning of the existence of some of the documents he had. I mean, that all goes to his mental state. I mean, it's clear and compelling evidence that he knew he was doing something improper, if not committing a crime. So I don't know why a special prosecutor wouldn't make that as part of the charges. If you have clear and compelling evidence that someone premeditated a crime, why would you exclude that from the prosecution?
The question isn't why would they exclude that charge, but why wouldn't you charge him both with the lower, easier to prove charge of simply the mishandling of the documents, and not just the willful mishandling of the documents, unless you were trying to undermine the argument that Trump is being treated differently than other folks who also mishandled documents. Do you see what I'm saying? If you charge him with a lower charge, then it raises the question of why others who have done the same thing and that would fall under the lower charge have not been similarly prosecuted.
I don't know. Do you know for certain that if they can't prove the higher charge, that the lower charge wouldn't come into consideration as part of a prosecution? I don't think we know what the ladder of charges are.
We have the indictment at this point, so certain choices have been made, and many legal commentators have made that exact point. But we appreciate you joining us today, Alex.
I think you're kind of pushing a conspiracy theory, but I don't think that there's any sort of effort to, as I pointed out, there are two different special prosecutors handling this. I think that there's clear and compelling evidence to charge Trump with a more serious crime. If that is defeated in court, I don't know if there could be a settlement where you then offer the less serious crime. I think there are we have one indictment now, but that does, we don't have the complete roadmap as to how this is going to play out. And then for you to say that this is being done as some sort of political justification for not charging Biden, I think that's really far-fetched.
Well, I'm not saying anything. I was asking you a question, and I do think that those who have an interest
you're
in
asking me a very loaded question,
well,
and
Alex,
I'm just trying to
with all due
people,
respect, Alex,
do it.
With all due respect, I think that journalists are going to have to figure out how to come up with better answers to the questions that many Americans are asking right now, as they see some real observable differences between who gets prosecuted for certain kind of crimes and others. I think there are meaningful distinctions between Donald Trump's behavior and the behavior of folks like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. But those meaningful distinctions are getting clouded in part by the charging choices that have happened here. And I think there could potentially be good explanations for those. Unfortunately, I don't think that we heard much of them today. Thank you again for joining us, Alex.
I don't think you can extrapolate too much from this indictment. Let's read the facts and report the facts as they are, and then we'll see what happens. But I'm not sure that you can rule out that that Trump isn't charged with anything lesser down the road, or that there isn't a settlement, ultimately a legal settlement that slaps him, or where he would plead guilty to legal lesser charges if it's something that, for instance, Biden also agrees to down the road. So I think to read one indictment and then make all sorts of extrapolations as to what it means down the road, I just think that's going a little far afield. And again, I think to insinuate that there's some sort of that this is politicized by the way it's set up, that it's part of it's a way to justify not going after Biden. As I pointed out, Jack Smith isn't handling the investigation of Biden, so I just don't think that's I don't think that's a well-founded speculation at all.
Alex, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
More Rising after this.